It's March 5th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting with license suspensions for nearly 8,000 doctors due to their mass walkout. The government has begun on-site inspections at hospitals to deal with any illegal acts in accordance with the law. And those who are confirmed as being absent from their posts will be informed of the suspension of their licenses starting today. The UN has appointed a new UN resident and coordinator for North Korea. Joe Colombano's entry to Pyongyang will mark the start of a return for key UN and international agencies after nearly 4 years since the regime's pandemic closure. France has enshrined abortion as a constitutional right, becoming the world's first country to do so. President Emmanuel Macron welcomed the move, calling the decision French pride, while anti-abortion groups and the Vatican strongly slammed the change. The government on Tuesday will continue to make on-site inspections to look for violations at hospitals. In fact, doctors who are not back at their post will be notified of the suspension of their licenses. Our Shin-Young starts us off.
The government said on Monday that it had begun procedures to suspend the licenses of around 7,000 trainee doctors who have yet to return to work. It gave the doctors until last Thursday to return to work, but said it would grant leniency if they reported for medical duties at their hospitals by Sunday. However, those failing to do so would see the government commence administrative and judicial procedures, such as the suspension of their medical licenses for between 3 months and a year or the seeking of official indictments. The latest count by the Ministry of Health and Welfare's inspection teams after Thursday's deadline showed that only 565 resident doctors had to return to work despite the warnings, with over 8,900 still absent from their posts nationwide. The ministry will continue inspections to confirm these numbers, allowing doctors to defend themselves through statements of opinion.
The government plans to conduct on-site investigations to respond to violations according to the law and principles. In particular, strict and prompt measures will be taken against key officials responsible for the collective action that has led to chaos in the medical field.
In the meantime, police have informed 5 former or current Korean Medical Association executives that they will be summoned for questioning between Wednesday and Thursday. This comes after search and seizure warrants were issued last week. The police have already imposed an overseas travel ban on 4 of them and will soon do the same for the remaining individual. A police investigation was started following an official complaint filed by the Health Ministry last Tuesday against the 5 officials, citing multiple allegations against them, including a possible violation of the medical law. Shin-Young, Arirang News.
And the absence of thousands of doctors means chaos in hospitals. But things are about to get worse, with some new interns and resident doctors having also walked away from their duties. Song Yoo-jin has more.
As the nationwide walkout of trainee doctors enters its 3rd week, hospitals are grappling with an increasingly severe shortage of medical staff. Despite the government's warning of license suspensions for doctors who do not return to work, the majority of trainee doctors at hospitals across the country did not show up for duty on Monday. Here at Chungbuk National University Hospital in Chungcheongbuk-do Province, only 8 out of more than 120 who have received return-to-work orders showed up to work. Because of this, only 40% of hospital beds are currently in use, and its emergency room can only accept 1/3 of its usual patient load.
The CT scan results have been delayed for 2 weeks now. We need the results as soon as possible to find the cause and proceed with the proper treatment. But the patient isn't feeling well, and the results aren't out yet, so it's frustrating.
However, these hospitals are expected to face an even more dire shortage of staff due to the absence of new trainee doctors. Hospitals had hoped things would get better when newly appointed interns and residents were due to start in March. However, on Monday, the first workday of the month, even the country's 5 major hospitals located in Seoul did not see the majority of their new trainee doctors. Around 90% of soon-to-be interns at major hospitals in Seoul reportedly withdrew from signing their training contracts last week. While fellow doctors have been filling the healthcare void left by those who resigned, some hospitals are now seeing these doctors also leave their positions. For example, in Jeollanam-do province at Jeonnam National University Hwasun Hospital, out of the 52 new fellow doctors, 21 gave up their jobs, and 13 out of 16 did so at Joseon University Hospital in the city of Gwangju. In Danguk University Hospital in Cheonan, Chungcheongnam-do province, only 5 out of 10 fellow doctors have signed their contracts. To help address this medical void, since last month, 12 military hospitals have opened their emergency rooms.
My father broke his hip joint, and because of his existing health issues, finding a hospital for surgery was a challenge. Many hospitals were unavailable due to the walkout, so we were feeling stuck. Then, we saw on TV that military hospitals were opening their emergency rooms to civilians. We gave them a call, they said yes, so we rushed to the hospital.
According to Seoul's defense ministry, so far, more than 120 civilians have received medical services at these hospitals. 송유진, Arirang News.
A government warning of repercussions has done little to bring doctors back to hospitals, which has pushed the government to press ahead with the suspension of their licenses. We turn to Professor Cho Young for more. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. What would medical license being taken away mean for trainee doctors?
Well, for the doctors personally, it means that they can't practice medicine while their license is suspended. And depending on the duration of the suspension, they may not be able to actually get their specialist certification within the usual period. So career-wise, they might suffer some setback in terms of timing and so forth.
Right. Please do go ahead.
Well, what's more, I think what's pertinent is what's actually going to happen after the suspension. If they continue to defy the government and do not return to their workplace and also do not treat patients, they can actually be prosecuted as a result. And if they are found guilty of a criminal offense that ends up in a prison sentence, even if it's a suspended sentence, they could actually have their licenses revoked, not just suspended, which means that they will be without a license and they wouldn't be able to practice at all.
Right. Headache for job hunting is one thing, but facing criminal offense could be a lot bigger than just job hunting obstacles. Now, can the government suspend license right away then, effective as of today?
Well, indeed, the law does allow the ministry to do that, and the order to suspend the individual licenses can become effective, especially essentially straight away. I mean, it has to go through certain procedures, but it doesn't really take long. The question is whether they will be able to actually reach each of the individual doctors who have actually left their job, and whether the doctors would be able to take some sort of counteraction, some sort of legal action to defend themselves in the meantime.
Right. What kind of counter or legal actions do those trainee doctors have at the moment then?
Well, their choice is actually quite limited because there is a very clear provision under the Medical Act which allows the ministry to issue an order to individual doctors to take certain steps, such as returning to work, treating certain people, etc. But those orders, as I mentioned, have to reach the individual identified doctors, otherwise they are ineffective. And so the doctors can try to avoid personally actually receiving the orders. I understand that some doctors are actually preparing for constitutional challenge to the provision because essentially under the Constitution, everybody has freedom of work, which means that they should be able to choose what you do and where you do it and when you do it. But essentially this provision takes away that freedom from doctors because of their profession. But that's going to take a very long time, and there's a big question as to whether the action would be successful, and even if they are successful, if the judgment could actually be applied retrospectively. So for the doctors, it would be an uphill struggle.
Right, there will be a lot trickier process. Now, what's most concerning is that patients are left without treatment, including those who require emergency care. Professor Cho, is there any way patients can hold the government responsible for the standoff, for not being able to keep their right to life protected, possibly?
Yeah, I think it's certainly an option that patients could explore, although for some people it might be actually a bit too late. But governments could have done something more to try to stave off this kind of standoff in the first place. But the government will then blame the doctors, saying that they're the ones who actually walked off the job, even though the government actually tried to persuade them to accept compromises. So I think also for the patients, they're not really going to see much joy in terms of taking those kind of legal actions later on. It's something that they could certainly think about, and people who have really suffered as a result of this particular set of collective action, if we can call it that, can think about. But whether it will be successful or not, I think that's going to depend on lots of different variables.
Right, not a joyful action to take in either way. That's what you're saying. Now, health authorities have granted nurses instead of doctors, those PA nurses, the right to perform some of the medical procedures normally conducted by those doctors to ease the strain on hospital staff. Now, is this also a medical violation?
Well, this is the irony, because you will remember that last year the National Assembly tried to pass this Nurse Act or Nursing Act, which actually gave some more clear division of labor in terms of nurses. And even now in lots of hospitals, it is alleged that lots of nurses actually perform duties that are outside the scope of their authorized action. And what the ministry is actually doing, although I can't really comment on the legality of it without actually seeing what sort of things that they are now being permitted to do. But it does seem like they're creeping within the scope of those things that nurses are actually not currently authorized to do under the existing legislation. So in order to counter the gap left by the doctors who have walked off, they are authorizing nurses. But this actually runs counter to what the government was arguing in terms of not allowing the legislation to be passed in the National Assembly last year. So we are in a very ironic situation. And to answer your question, there is potential illegality regarding the government's action regard to the scope of nurses' authorized duties.
Right. Nonetheless, the best scenario would be doctors do return to their work and their patients.
Of course, yeah.
All right, Professor Cho, thank you so much for your insights this morning. We appreciate it. You have a great day.
Thank you.
The UN has announced its pick for a new resident coordinator for North Korea, raising expectations that officials from international organizations will once again be able to cross its borders. Our Lee Soo-jin has the details.
The UN has appointed a new official to lead its operations in North Korea, raising hopes that UN workers will soon be able to enter North Korea for the first time since the COVID-19 pandemic. The United Nations headquarters on Monday local time announced that Secretary General Antonio Guterres on March 1st appointed Joe Colombano as the new resident coordinator for North Korea. This comes amid expectations that UN officials could enter the North for the first time since 2021. Field officials from all international organizations left the North in 2021 after North Korea shut its borders in January 2020. The latest appointment also signals the possibility of members of other international organizations such as the World Health Organization, UN Development Program, and the World Food Program possibly soon crossing North Korea's borders. Colombano, who has over 25 years of experience in international relations, most recently served as the head of the Office of the United Nations Resident Coordinator to China in Beijing. He was also the Director for Sustainable Development at the Executive Office of the Secretary General in New York. He has a background in development finance, having worked at both the World Bank and at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. As a resident coordinator, he will lead the DPRK team in implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which seeks to end poverty and promote peace. His appointment comes after the term of his predecessor, Prodi Moring, ended in December last year. The UN spokesperson said in a briefing on Monday that Colombano will be working from the UN office in Bangkok as Moring did after the North sealed its borders due to the pandemic. Although the exact date for when Colombano can enter the North is yet unclear, the UN spokesperson said that discussions are underway to allow UN staff to return as soon as conditions allow. 이수진, Arirang News.
France has become the first country in the world to enshrine women's rights to have an abortion in its constitution. And despite an ongoing movement looking to roll back abortion rights in the U.S., as well as opposition from the Vatican, French President Emmanuel Macron called the amendment a message to the world. Lee Seung-ja has more.
The French Parliament on Monday approved a constitutional amendment that stipulates women's freedom to have an abortion, making France the first country in the world to do so. Parliamentarians voted on the constitutional amendment at the Palace of Versailles, passing it with an overwhelming support of 780 in favor and 72 against. The French Constitution will now guarantee a woman's freedom to voluntarily terminate a pregnancy. France's decision to make abortion a constitutional right is in stark contrast to the situation in the United States and an ongoing movement there to roll back abortion rights. In 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court abolished the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, which allowed abortions at up to 24 weeks of pregnancy, effectively banning abortion in the country. While several other countries around the world have included reproductive rights in their constitutions, France is the first to explicitly state that an abortion will be guaranteed as a right. Polls showed around 85% of the public supported amending the Constitution to protect the right to an abortion in a country where abortion has been legal since 1975. Following the vote in Parliament, President Emmanuel Macron said the decision was a source of pride for France and a message to the world. He also announced that he would celebrate International Women's Day on the 8th by publicly recognizing the National Day of the Constitution. The decision was met with cheers from abortion rights supporters, while the Eiffel Tower was lit up, displaying a message translating as "My body, my choice." Right before the vote, the Vatican expressed its opposition in a statement, saying there is no right to take a life. Watchers believe the latest decision by France could pave the way for other countries to guarantee the right to abortion in their constitutions. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
With expectation that inflation in the U.S. will continue to slow, prices of gold futures rose to an all-time high on Monday. On the New York Mercantile on Monday, the closing price on the New York Mercantile Exchange on Monday, the closing price for gold futures for April stood at $2,126.30 per ounce. That's up 1.5% from the previous trading day. To beat the previous all-time high is at 2 months. As gold prices tend to rise when interest rates fall, experts believe that gold futures market participants are betting on an early interest rate cut by the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Good morning, I'm Choi Ji-hee, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in the United States, where the Supreme Court has decided to uphold former President Donald Trump's eligibility to run for president. The top court on Monday local time unanimously overturned Colorado's December decision to disqualify Trump from the Republican primary ballot, saying that it's up to Congress, not individual states, to determine the qualification of federal officials and candidates. The ruling is likely to have an impact on similar lawsuits filed by Maine and Illinois. In addition to the ruling, Trump is still facing a number of civil and criminal cases, but with one obstacle cleared in his path to the presidency, the ex-president immediately claimed victory by posting "Big Win for America" on his social media platform. On Tuesday local time, Republican voters in Colorado and 14 other states will go to the polls in what's being dubbed Super Tuesday to pick the party's presidential nominee. Now to Haiti, which was overrun by armed gangs over the weekend. A gang leader has called for the ousting of Haiti's Prime Minister Ariel Henry, whose whereabouts is still unknown as of Monday, 3 days after he signed a bilateral accord in Kenya to pave the way for a possible multinational force to help restore order in Haiti. According to the UN, gangs now control 80% of the capital, Port-au-Prince, and the government has declared a state of emergency and a nighttime curfew from 6 p.m. to 5 a.m. to try to regain control of the situation after thousands of inmates escaped from the capital's central prison. Many blame the Prime Minister for rapidly losing ground to the gangs over the past 3 years, while refusing to organize elections that would bring in a new government and a fresh start. Moving on to Scandinavia, where NATO commenced a military exercise on Monday aimed at protecting its newly extended Nordic territory, with Finland and Sweden set to participate in a NATO military alliance exercise for the first time. More than 20,000 soldiers from 13 countries are participating in the drills, which will continue until the 15th of March in the northern regions of Finland, Norway, and Sweden. Sweden's bid to join the organization has been ratified by all NATO members, allowing the country to take part in collective defense in the alliance's regions. On Monday, a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket successfully launched carrying 3 U.S. astronauts and 1 Russian cosmonaut to the International Space Station. This came after the first attempt to launch the Crew 8 mission on Saturday was postponed due to strong winds. Despite the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, space exploration remains one of the few areas where the United States and Russia continue to work closely together. The team will be in space for 6 months, where it will carry out over 200 science experiments, including growing artificial replicas of human organs in a low-gravity environment. The 4 crew members are scheduled to reach the ISS on Tuesday.
Crew 8 astronauts to orbit. Good morning. It's Gyeongchip today, already the 3rd spring season term out of 6. And it looks to be a rainy Gyeongchip. Right now, certain parts of the country are seeing showers, which will expand gradually nationwide. The east of Gangwon-do could see up to 30 millimeters of rain. Jeju Island could see 10 to 40 millimeters of showers. Heavier showers or snow in mountainous regions on the island, with a strong wind advisory in place on Jeju. 1 to 5 centimeters of snow could fall there, while mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see 15 centimeters of heavy snow through Wednesday. Now, this round of precipitation will wash away the lingering dust in the air, and highs will be 1 to 5 degrees lower than yesterday, and especially those in southern regions will notice chillier highs at just 9 degrees Celsius over in Daegu. Seoul tops out at 11 degrees Celsius with spotty rain to no rain in the capital area. On and off wet weather is in the forecast through Thursday in Gangwon-do and southern regions, while temperatures continue to go up and down. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.